Welcome back to La Pausa, a Pints and Punditry podcast here at the Pitchside Pub. It is Thursday, March 14th, and today we're going to shift gears a little bit, leaving Europe for a minute so we can talk about the U.S. men's national team, and they are, of course, on the radar because the Nations League roster was released yesterday for the upcoming international break and Nations League competition that's coming up, and there were some interesting choices on there, but nothing too groundbreaking. But I'm going to talk about the Nations League in general and how, if at all, any of this matters to the U.S. men's national team. So that's going to be our topic today. But before we get into that, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below if you're watching this on YouTube. Follow the podcast if you're listening on Spotify. Get in that comment section. What do you think about the roster? What do you think about the Nations League, the men's national team in general? Greg Berhalter, he's always fun to talk about. And of course, if you don't already, go ahead and follow us on Twitter at Pitchside Pub. So the rosters came out. There weren't a lot of surprises on there. The big one that's getting a lot of discussion is the lack of Brenden Aaronson, but frankly, he hasn't played all that well this year, and so it's not terribly shocking other than the fact that he has been a relative mainstay on this roster for a little while now. So it is notable that he is not on it, but it's justified. He hasn't played all that well. He has underwhelmed at a couple stops now, and the most noteworthy thing about this roster is the depth that the United States has these days, so that a player like Brenden Aaronson doesn't make the team if he's not in form. And that's the key, is they have enough depth that these guys that are out of form or not producing or coming off some injuries, they're not a given to make the team. And that is a new development over the past few years for the United States. They are still lacking the star power and the truly impact players beyond Christian Pulisic, but their depth has come a long way. And with all the injuries that are in the game now, and these guys are playing way too many fixtures for way too many different teams, it's relevant. It's relevant. You've got to have depth for when a player misses significant time with injury, like your captain, Tyler Adams, who has yet to appear in a game for Bournemouth this season at the time of the release of this roster. And thus, when they had to make this decision, they didn't know what they could get out of Tyler Adams. He hadn't played yet. He's been an unused substitute once for Bournemouth when they had to make this decision. They don't know his level of fitness. I'm sure they have reports from training, and they're getting feedback from him himself, and all that sort of stuff, but they don't know for sure what they're going to get out of him. Now, he is such an automatic on this roster and is a leader and is the captain of the team, so if he can walk, he's included on this roster, and he is on his way back, and he has dressed for Bournemouth, so he can give them something. But it's noteworthy that he is on this roster, and there was a lot of questions as to if he would be, given how little he has played this year, and by little I mean none. And yet, it was an automatic decision. It was considered automatic that Giovanni Reyna would be on this roster, and he is. And yet, Giovanni Reyna has only played 418 more minutes this year than Tyler Adams, who has yet to appear for his team. Reyna has been used for both of his clubs, Dortmund and now on loan at Nottingham Forest, as a substitute on a number of occasions. He has appearances. He's dressed for almost every game in which he's been healthy, and yet he's only played 418 minutes more than a guy who has not played at all this season. So, if you can make Reyna an automatic, then you got to put Tyler Adams on there, assuming he has functioning legs, and he does. So, I think it's a given that he's on this roster. You can make the argument that carrying two guys like that is an issue, and I had a discussion with a pretty prominent football writer on Twitter who made that argument, and that's a valid one. But they went ahead and did it, and I think Tyler Adams will help this team even if he never steps foot on the pitch because of his leadership abilities and what he brings in the dressing room. And he's just a guy that they love to have, and he brings that level of intensity. And so it was probably a given that they would do anything they could to get him on this roster because it improves their chances of winning the Nations League. Which begs the question, does that matter? Does it matter if the United States wins the Nations League? Do you care? Does any of it matter? And the sort of snarky yet kind of accurate answer is no, none of it matters. None of it matters. What is the Nations League? This whole tournament really means very little. It is technically a qualifier for the Gold Cup, but whether or not the United States meets that qualification level is not really in question. The top 8 teams in the Nations League top group are going to go on to the Gold Cup. So that is a relative automatic that we don't really have a whole lot of concern over. So outside of that, what are we even watching for here? And then, of course, the Gold Cup itself is basically our version of the Euros, right? That's the North American and Central American version of the Euros. But even that, it's not like that's giving you a qualification to the World Cup, which is going to be automatic this year anyway. So in theory, nothing the United States does between now and the World Cup matters in any way, shape, or form. They're going to qualify for that tournament, and that's all that really matters. However, it's not quite that simple, because if we want to viably have a chance at competing at the World Cup in 2026 on our home turf, we've got to make sure we are in the best shape we can possibly be. And I don't mean level of fitness, let's run some extra sprints and get in shape. I mean playing together, playing well, having these guys on the pitch together, gaining experience together that will prove to be invaluable during that time, which is why if there are players that could possibly be involved down the road in that competition, they need to start being involved in these teams now. All eyes should be on the World Cup in 2026. And if a decision doesn't help the United States get prepared for that or gain some experience for that, it shouldn't be made. So that should be the lens through which all of this is viewed, including, in my opinion, watching the Nations League. So I don't actually care if we win these games. I want to win them. In fact, we'd better win them. But it's not enough to just win them. It's going to matter how we win them, how we play, the style we play, the level of dominance which we assert over lesser clubs. So I'm looking for individual performances. I'm looking more for an evaluation of Greg Berhalter. I am not sold that he will be the World Cup coach in 2026. However, if they're going to make that change, it needs to be sooner rather than later. And yet they just rehired him, which is not a move I was personally in favor of. If you followed the channel for a while, you know that I'm not a huge Berhalter proponent. I think we could do worse. I think we could do a lot better. My big issue with Berhalter is his rigidness and his inability to adjust playing styles to fit the clientele, to fit the players, to fit the talent that he has. He has his system, and he's trying to put the square peg in the round hole, because the round hole is how he likes to play. Well, you don't get to do that in national team coaching. You can do that at a club. You can say, go get me players that fit my system. That doesn't work here. That doesn't work here, and yet that has been his insistence this whole time. And so I have my issues with Greg Berhalter, but it doesn't mean we can't play well, we can't get prepared for the World Cup, and I am resigned to the fact that he will probably be the manager at the World Cup, even though I would be perfectly fine with making that change. But that change would have to come sooner rather than later, so that coach has a couple years with this team to guide them through these tournaments. Now, if the United States comes out and falls flat on their face in the Nations League, does that call for a change in leadership? I don't want to say yes or no. I think it's possible. I think it depends on how it happens and why it happens. Just like I don't think winning these games automatically means Berhalter's doing a good job and is safe. It depends on how it happens and why it happens. If they come out and they look fluid and attacking and they dominate their competition that they're supposed to dominate, then great. But if they're barely squeaking out, 1-0 victories, playing uninspired football with no tactical strategy and no adjustments against lesser competition, I don't care at all that it's a win. That is not what we need to see. The goal here is not to be the best team in CONCACAF. That's not the objective anymore. It used to be. At one point it was. It was to be better than Mexico, right? That's not the objective anymore. The objective is to be one of the 10 best teams in the world and have a viable shot at advancing and winning and actually competing at this World Cup. We advanced out of the group stage last year, but didn't really have a whole lot of hope of going much further. We were clearly out-coached, out-strategized by a Netherlands team that was also as good, certainly as talented as the United States, and then was incredibly better prepared. And we got pantsed. We got exposed. It was ugly. It was ugly, and not just the scoreline, but the way it went down. So we were not prepared to compete beyond the group stage. And yeah, the group stage is what the U.S. is built for, right? It's beat the teams you're supposed to beat, hopefully get a draw somewhere against the tougher competition, survive and advance, right? No, this time around, we want to go win our group. We want to win a round of 16 game. We want to win a round of 8 game. Get to those quarters, get to those semis, really compete and have a shot to win the whole damn thing. And so, if we just limp through the Nations League and we came in second, we beat some teams, and just got the results we need to get, that's not going to cut it. That's not going to cut it. We need to go out and assert dominance. There is no reason the United States is not a hot knife through butter when it comes to CONCACAF competition, because outside of Canada and Mexico, there really isn't anyone that should be able to run with us and be able to compete with us. And even Mexico is not what they once were. It's really the United States and Canada right now, and that shouldn't be nearly as close as it is, frankly. So my evaluative eyes on this will be on Berhalter and on strategy and on tactics and on the way the players adhere to them and adjust and play. Not did we win and did this guy score a goal and things like that. No, I want to see some changes. I want to see something different. I want to see some front foot aggression. I want to see us attack, get out and run, and not just this flinging crosses into the box and hope for the best nonsense that we did in the World Cup, because that is just simply not going to get it done. So is Berhalter willing to change? We haven't seen that yet, but you never know. Are the players adapting to his system? Maybe. Maybe they're getting even more used to it. They seem to have a pretty good handle on it. I think the system's just not all that great. Are we going to up the tempo? Even within the framework of Berhalter's system, could we play it more aggressively, more assertively, more direct down the middle? How are we going to use guys like Giovanni Reyna? Where does he fit in? Where do some of these players who are evolving and morphing into different styles of players, where do they fit in? Weston McKennie's having a great season. I can't wait to see him. Tim Weah has been used almost as a wing back. How does that play in? Is he still going to be a right winger for us? Probably. But I'm interested in these storylines. This is what I want to see, in addition to some of the new guys and some of the guys who have really come on strong in their European seasons, the Joe Scallies and Jedi Robinsons and guys like that. So it should be very interesting. It'll be worth watching for individual storylines. I could not care less about end results other than they'd better be decisive. Winning is not good enough. It's going to matter how we win and by how much and the style with which we win and the way, if at all, in which the United States asserts its dominance over what should be much inferior competition. I would love to get your thoughts on the Nations League, on the U.S. men's national team, on this roster, on Greg Berhalter, on all of it. Get down in those comments and let me know what you think. Also, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're watching this on YouTube. Follow the podcast on Spotify if you're listening on there. And, of course, if you don't already, make sure you follow me on Twitter at PitchsidePub. That's it for this episode of La Pausa, a Pints and Punditry podcast here at the Pitchside Pub.